Namaskar friends, good evening and welcome to Pune International Center. I am Abhay Vaidya, Director PIC. This is our seventh lecture in the series India and the World's Great Religions, curated by our members Dr. Latika Patgaonkar and Senior Fellow Professor Pradeep Apte, the chair for today's session. This lecture series was conceived by PIC's Vice President Dr. Vijay Kelkar to underscore the plurality of the Indian ethos. We've had fascinating, insightful lectures on Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Hinduism in this series. And we will be having a few more lectures in this series in the coming months. Today, we are honored to have with us Professor Sadanand More to speak with us on Maharashtra's Bhagavad Dharma. Born to ardent Warkari parents, Professor More rose to prominence not only as a writer, but also as a poet, critic, biographer, playwright, historian, and scholar. Tukaram Darshan is one of his widely revered books of literary criticism, for which he received the prestigious Sahitya Academy Award. Professor More is a postgraduate in philosophy and ancient history and culture, and his thesis, The Gita, A Theory of Human Action, received the Gurudev Ranade Damle Award. His postdoctoral research, Krishna, the Man and His Mission, was published in 1995 and is considered to be a seminal contribution to the world of Krishna scholarship. He is the author of such other books as Lokmanya Te Mahatma, Char Bhavande, and Garza Maharashtra, and has written biographies on Sant Jnaneshwar, Lokmanya Tilak, and Mahatma Phule. His unprecedented insights into the literature by Marathi saints and the Bhakti tradition have enriched the literary criticism in Marathi. Professor More was president of the 88th Akhil Bharatiya Marathi Sahitya Sammelan held in Ghuman, Punjab in 2015. He was also elected as the president of Marathi Tattvajnan Parishad, Marathi Itihas Parishad, and Akhil Bharatiya Sant Sahitya Sammelan. Welcome to this program, sir. Chairing today's session is Professor Pradeep Apte, Senior Fellow PIC and Professor Emeritus Savitribai Phule, Pune University. Professor Apte is an eminent professor of economics with areas of expertise in operations research, econometrics, international trade and finance, public economics, and agricultural economics. He has been a member of several state and central finance commissions and is a visiting faculty at the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, Ferguson College, and a number of other institutions. He has deep interest and knowledge of history and writes a popular column in Lok Sabha. This program has a Q&A segment, and you are welcome to post your questions in the question box. May I now request Professor Apte to initiate the proceedings. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Abhay, and welcome, Professor More. We are really pleased to have you. I think I should not spend much time because we would like to have most of the time available for Professor More, such an eminent person. And I think Abhay has introduced you. You can easily imagine. This is one very peculiar strand of the religious traditions in India. And I think there is no better person than Professor More to speak on this. And I would hand over it to Professor More. So please take your seats. Please have your lecture.
Thanks a lot, Pradeep ji, Abhay ji, and all those who have assembled here on this kind of screen. Today I am really obliged in having a kind of invitation by Pune International Center to deliver a lecture on Bhagavad Dharma. I hope I will contribute something which you may appreciate. Really speaking, this series of lectures, which is organized by the center, is regarding the world religions. And it is but natural that Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and Hinduism as such may figure in, or rather they have to. Zoroastrian, and you must have listened to some such lectures by eminent scholars. Now the question may be asked that this Bhagavad Dharma, which is generally treated as one of the, you can say, cults of the broader religion called Hindu Dharma or sometimes Vedic Dharma, and it has not crossed the boundaries of India, although it has penetrated into Punjab by Saint Namdev, somewhere in south, etc., etc. But how then are we entitled to call it as the world religion? Now, with this question, I will begin my lecture. Sir Ramkrishna Gopal Bhandarkar, very well known figure, scholarly figure, Indologist and Orientalogist, a very versed person worldwide in Sanskrit language. Now, he belonged to what was called Prarthana Samaj. This religious society was found in the second half of 19th century. The gentlemen among others, like Justice M.G. Ranade, again the great philologist Shankar Pandurang Pandit, and some such persons. Again, very renowned persons in India and abroad also. Now they found this kind of religious society, you can even call it a cult, even a religion, which they claim to be a kind of reincarnation of Bhagavad Dharma, and therefore they used to call it Nava Bhagavad Dharma, Neo Bhagavad Dharma. I mean their own Prarthana Samaj. And it was as a kind of metamorphosis of the cult called Bhagavad Dharma of the Maharashtrian saints from Naneshwar to Tukaram. Now, once upon a time, of course, in course of his discourses, Bhandarkar explained that the religions which were, which spread in the universe, in the world as such, like especially he mentioned three: Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism. I mean, in reverse order, may I put it. But this kind of the religion of saints, especially he was concentrating on Tukaram, the religion of Tukaram. Now, it didn't, spread like these religions. And how then or how then could he call it a world religion, which he used to? Then he himself answered the question, pointing out that these three religions, that is to say, Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam, they enjoyed a kind of royal patronage. This patronage, say for example, Samrat Ashoka or Harsha or Kanishka, they supported Buddhism and constructed a kind of network, and therefore it was possible for that religion to cross the boundaries of its birth, that is to say India. The similar thing happened with Christianity. As you know, in Rome, the Emperor Constantine, when he embraced this religion, it became naturally the religion of the Roman Empire. And many such rulers and kings, etc., they embraced this religion. And then definitely again this religion, that is Christianity, enjoyed a kind of royal patronage. Again, the history repeated with Islam. It was many royal persons converted themselves to this religion, and then the Caliphate and the whole thing as it spread over the whole world. Now Bhandarkar said that this is not the case with Bhagavad or Warkari or Tukoba's religion. Then he added that had this religion been supported royally in the way in which these three religions were supported, had it enjoyed the royal patronage, it would have become the world religion. That was the contention of Sir Bhandarkar. And he said, well, now gone are the days of royal patron, etc. But it is left to us, that is to say, the members of the Prarthana Samaj, to propagate this religion and make it the world religion. Of course, this didn't happen with Prarthana Samaj, and there are reasons for that. But my point is that, according to Bhandarkar, this religion had every potential to become the world religion, although it actually didn't become. And this is how I would initiate my discussion. Okay, then as I know, as you know, I have already Ranade, Bhandarkar and Ranade, the Prarthana Samajist people, they had some links with Brahmo Samaj in Bengal, but they were highly influenced by the same tradition in Maharashtra, which they call Bhagavad Dharma. Ranade called Bhagavad Dharma. Now, this happened in 19th century. May I tell you that 19th century and the earlier decades of 20th century, they carried an influential discourse on Bhagavad Dharma. The scholars who were involved in this discourse were, I have just mentioned two, Bhandarkar and Ranade. Then we have historian V.K. Rajwade, and of course Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Vitthal Ramji Shinde. And later on, of course, there were others too, like say Dr. Shanda Pense. In the meantime, we had Vitthal Ramji Shinde, I had already mentioned. So these were the main scholars, including Rajaram Shastri Bhagwat, of course, who were the exponents of Bhagavad Dharma, and I will follow them. I mean, I will just discuss their opinions regarding Bhagavad Dharma and what rather I would like to say on that. Now, already Justice Ranade had begun the discussion. According to Ranade, this tradition of the saints in Maharashtra was really responsible for what happened in later history, that is to say, the Swaraj of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. So according to Ranade, the saints like Jnaneshwar and Tukaram, they really speaking laid the foundation of this political entity called Swaraj, the Maratha kingdom. Because Ranade had his own way of expressing the things. He said that, well, they had their own social philosophy in particular, which was egalitarian, which was against any discretion as such, like castes and others. Okay, rich and poor, etc., etc. So this provided a kind of solid social base for the whole, building, you can say, the architect of Maratha Raj at the hands of Shivaji. That is how he opined. And interestingly enough, that he didn't distinguish between these Warkari saints and one who followed this tradition after, succeeded rather, that is Samarth Ramdas, whose philosophy, you may say, whose cult, etc., was later on called as Maharashtra Dharma. Now, for Ranade, the Maharashtra Dharma was not an independent entity as such. It was simply a kind of continuation of the Bhagavad Dharma. So both of them can be either called Bhagavad Dharma or you can call them Maharashtra Dharma. Both of them. Whereas Rajwade didn't accept this argument. For him, the Maharashtra Dharma of Ramdas was different from the Bhagavad Dharma of the Warkari saints. Not only that, going a step forward, Rajwade criticized the saints or their Warkari cult as according to him, according to Rajwade, that these people weaken the fighting spirit of Maharashtra, and therefore Maharashtra fell in the trap of foreigners, foreign invaders, and of course we had lost our freedom. That was how, Rajwade was trying to explain the things. Whereas the persons like Lokmanya Tilak and later on Dr. Pense, they were not, they didn't appreciate this kind of making discrimination between these two. They also pursued those two cults as a kind of continuity, not a break. Okay, this is one of the important things which I would like to mention here. But apart from that, the general impression of the educated elite people at that time in late 19th century and early 20th century was that the two sects, the Warkari sect, the saints, Dhaneshwar Tukaram, and the another Ramdasi sect, they had some differences which culminated into two distinct things. That is to say, the first was that is this Warkari cult was, which is called Bhagavad Dharma. Again, let me remind you, in Maharashtra, Bhagavad Dharma means Warkari cult. I will definitely explain the things in detail. Now, the distinction goes like this, that the Bhagavad Dharma or Warkari cult was not proactive. It was rather passive, prone to renunciation of the worldly things, etc., etc. Whereas the Ramdasi cult was, really speaking, a kind of militancy, that is to say. So this is how the distinction went on at the hands of the scholars like Rajwade and his followers like Bhatt and Gadre and others. Now, on this backdrop, we can come to Lokmanya Tilak. Now, Tilak, his classic work, as you know, Gita Rahasya. In Gita Rahasya, he tried to interpret Bhagavad Gita as the philosophy of Karma Yoga. And in which he asserted that, really speaking, the import of Bhagavad Gita doesn't leave any space, any scope for the philosophy of renunciation, nivrutti or sannyas. Rather, it insists on performance of the actions which we are due to perform, which we are expected to perform. This is how the distinction goes on, Pravritti Dharma and Nivritti Dharma. Now, the long tradition of the interpreters of Bhagavad Gita, the Bhashyakar, right from Shankaracharya, say to Madhvacharya, and Tilak would definitely go beyond that and would try to mention, not discuss as such, Dhaneshwar Maharaj and Vaman Pandit in Maharashtra. And he would say that this tradition, really speaking, it leads to renunciation, the path of renunciation. That is the Nivrutti Marga. And fine, therefore, he is coming forward with a new interpretation, of course, according to him, genuine interpretation of Bhagavad Gita as Karma Yoga. So it was a Gita Rahasya. That is what he named his text. Now Tilak said that not only these acharyas like Shankaracharya, etc., but he even names Dhaneshwar and all the commentaries before him. They, really speaking, belong to Nivrutti Marga. Okay, as opposed to Pravrutti Marga, that is of action, that is to say. And therefore, he said that, well, for the first time, he is coming out with this real import of Bhagavad Gita. Now, while discussing the philosophy of Gita, that is Karma Yoga, he pointed out that in Bhagavad Gita itself, there are descriptions of this way, this path of action, and naturally that will be explored during his argument in his work, and of course, naturally the work will be followed by interpretation of each shlok to shlok, verse to verse, and that is fine. That is really the method of writing commentary. But he, as I told you, incorporated Dhaneshwar also in the similar way. I mean, in the same camp, rather. That is to say, the Bhashyakaras or the commentators belonging to the Nivrutti or Sannyas type of commentators. Okay, commentaries. Now, then I will mention a name of another scholar, Dr. Bhapam Bairat, who, really speaking, was a great scholar and scholar of Dhaneshwar and of Varkari cult. Now, when he read these lines of Lokmanya Tilak, he was rather upset, and he reacted that Tilak might not have read Dhaneshwari carefully. Had he read it, then he would not have classified Dhaneshwari and put it in the other camp, that is to say, Nivrutti camp. Rather, Dhaneshwari is a commentary which, really speaking, supports the performance of action, and it is, really speaking, Pravrutti Marga. This is one thing. Now, Tilak, going back again, Tilak pointed out that the discussion of the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita as Karma Yoga, as Pravrutti Marga, is also available. That kind of discussion of that particular path of karma is also available in other sections of Mahabharata, especially in Narayani as Narayaniya Dharma, which is Bhagavad Dharma. So according to Tilak, now let me tell you that Bhagavad Dharma, that is the philosophy of Gita itself, is, really speaking, the Karma Yoga. So he equates Karma Yoga with Bhagavad Dharma of Krishna. And of course, the predecessor of Krishna, including Janak, etc., including Manu, Ikshvaku, and so forth, and other Rajarshis. Okay, so that is the point to be noted. So this is how the things went with Lokmanya Tilak. Now the next important point is that naturally the interpreters rather misinterpreted the activist import of Bhagavad Gita, of Bhagavad Dharma as such, and they gave it a twist of Sannyas Marga, of Nivrutti Marga, but this is not the real Bhagavad Dharma. Okay, now this is how the subject, I mean, my topic is introduced. Now with Tilak, with whatever Tilak has said, one can go a step further and ask the question, then what is exactly meant by Bhagavad Dharma? And the things are clear. I mean, you may go by the root of etymology and linguistics and ask the question what it really speaking it means. So we are all familiar with the term Bhagwan. Now that can also be explained traditionally that Bhaga means Aishwarya, some kind. They are said to there are, it is said that there are 6 such kind of qualities. If one possesses these qualities, one has these qualities, then he is called Bhagwan. I'm not interested in that kind of thing. I mean, just I mentioned it. But there are some persons, maybe they are deified then, or I mean, in their own lifetime itself, they are recognized, acknowledged as Bhagwan. So Bhagavad Dharma, in a sense, is the religion, okay, propounded by these people who are called Bhagwan. This is one meaning of the term Bhagwan. I'm saying Bhagavad. Naturally, this Bhagavad Dharma of Maharashtrian saints, which we are discussing, it is said that this Dharma, really speaking, who was the first exponent of this Dharma? It was Lord Krishna himself. And Lord Krishna was acknowledged as Bhagwan, or is acknowledged as Bhagwan. So it is his religion, therefore it is Bhagavad Dharma. Now Vitthal Ramji Shinde, another very important but neglected scholar of Maharashtra, he came forward with another meaning. He said that, well, the Bhagavad Dharma is the Dharma which accept some deity as Bhagwan. And naturally, these people are the devotees of the particular deities. And therefore, he wanted to expand the meaning of the term Bhagavad Dharma according to various respective deities. So what we generally call Bhagavad Dharma, that Dharma accepts Krishna or Vishnu, naturally, as its deity to be worshipped. But Shinde went forward, going forward, he said that, well, if one accepts Buddha as Bhagwan, and let me tell you, Buddha has often been called Bhagwan in Buddhist tradition. So we can very well talk of both the Bhagavad. Why not? Then, as you know, even there could be Jain Bhagavad. Now, if you go with Shinde's logic, then you can definitely incorporate a number of cults as Bhagavad Dharma. But that was Shinde's approach. But in our own tradition, there are, even the Shaivas are called, because there is something Shaiva Bhagavata. There is a text called Devi Bhagavat. So even these people can be classified as Bhagavad Dharma. But the real, generally accepted pattern is that generally the people who are devotees of Bhagwan Vishnu, accordingly Krishna, who was the incarnation of Vishnu himself, so they worship Krishna and therefore they are called Bhagavad. So this is how there can be a mapping of the term, mapping of the concept, that you can definitely say that it is a religion which worships Krishna as Bhagwan. You can definitely say in another way that it is religion which comes from Bhagwan Krishna himself. So there can be two ways. There can be a third way. What is the third way? The third way is that this religion called Bhagavad Dharma, it accepts the Bhagavad Puran as its Praman Grantha, sacred, authentic text. And therefore, these people are also called Bhagavad. Okay, so there could be 3 meanings of Bhagavad Dharma. Now, if you go by the text as such, and these three meanings are not, they are not opposed to each other, of course, but rather they complement each other. How? Now, these people have accepted Bhagavad, but they also have accepted Bhagavad Gita. And therefore, let me quote one line from Tukaram. Tukaram says of some people, some Sattvic people, Gita Bhagavata Kariti Shravana, Gita Bhagavata Kariti Shravana Akhanda Chinta. So these are the people who listen to, that is to say, who accept as the authentic text Gita and Bhagavad. And that's all. And why Gita and Bhagavad? Because both of these, Gita and Bhagavad, in particular, the 11th canto of Bhagavad, 11th skanda, Ekadashi skanda of Bhagavad as their religious text. Why? Why the 11th skanda? Because the 11th skanda of Bhagavad contains the dialogue between Krishna and Uddhav. So it is on par with the Gita. Gita contains the dialogue. Okay, Gita is the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. So these two texts, the Gita and the 11th canto of Bhagavad, they are on par because both of them include the teachings, etc., of Lord Krishna. So Gita and Bhagavad. So Bhagavad Dharma is a religion who has these two texts as its authentic sacred text, Gita and Bhagavad. And why? Why? Because both of them are delivered by Lord Krishna, who was himself the incarnation of Vishnu and the God Almighty, of course, because they accept the theory of incarnation. So this is how the authentic text. So the Dharma can be identified on account of authentic text and the deities, Gita, Bhagavad, Krishna, Vishnu, the Lord as such. So therefore, the Warkari cult accepts these two texts. And now, interestingly enough, Jnaneshwar is said to have laid the foundation of this Bhagavad Sampradaya in Maharashtra. The contemporary of Jnaneshwar was Namadev, who explicitly mentions Bhagavad Dharma. One of his Abhangas, I will again quote from, of course, this time from Namadev. Amha sapadale varma karu Bhagavata Dharma. Amha sapadale varma karu Bhagavata Dharma. So we are followers of Bhagavad Dharma. And Bhagavad Dharma means this thing. We have accepted Krishna, Vishnu as deity, and we have accepted Gita and Bhagavad as the sacred books. That is all. Now, Jnaneshwar, it is said, there is this whole text of Abhanga by Sant Bahinabai, disciples of Sant Tukaram. That is the metaphor of the building, of architect of the temple. Sant Krupa Zali, Imarat Phala Ali, Jnanadeve Rachila Paya. There is this architecture, okay, constructed by the saints, of course, of which the foundation was laid by Jnaneshwar. Jnanadevi Rachila Paya, Uvarile Devalaya, Namatayacha Kinkar Kitene Kela Vistar. The further work of construction was done by Namadev. Janardana Ekanath Khamba Dila Bhagavat. Tuka Zala se Kalsa Bhajana Kara Savakash. Now, how Bahinabai proceeds? What does it mean to say that Jnanadevi Rachila Paya? Because you see, this question is important because as history reveals us, the Warkari Sampradaya, so to say Bhagavad Dharma of Maharashtra, it was existing even before Jnaneshwar in the form of, see, any religion or religious cult properly so-called requires three important things. First, it must have the deity to be worshipped. Okay. Next, there is the sacred text for the deity of that religion. And thirdly, there is a method of worshipping. Now, these three things are required. Now, so far as this Warkari cult is concerned, their deity, that is to say Vitthal, existed in Pandharpur in the form of icon before Jnaneshwar. Fine. Then the method of worship, this is typical to Warkari Sampradaya only, rather unique. What was that? That was Wari. That is to say, a periodical, regular visit to Pandharpur on foot, walking on foot, and singing and dancing at that time. So this was already in vogue before Jnaneshwar. So then, I mean, Jnaneshwar himself belonged to that. His family itself belonged to that particular tradition. Now, what does it mean then that Jnaneshwar laid the foundation? See, Jnaneshwar laid the foundation in this way that, let me explain to you. The cult was existing in the form, I mean, with the deity, okay, and the form of worship. But unless and until there is the sacred text, authentic text, Praman Grantha, the cult or the religion cannot be said to be a religion properly so called. It lacks. So before, I mean, without this, you cannot call it a religion properly. It becomes a kind of folk religion, fine. And there are so many such religions. So Jnaneshwar, with his writing, the Jnaneshwari, provided the sacred text to the Warkaris, and it almost became the kind of religion. That is how he laid the foundation of that Bhagavad Dharma in Maharashtra. The point is that why, after all, the Warkaris at that time should follow Jnaneshwar and accept the Jnaneshwari as their text, their religious text? Because they had already accepted Vitthal as, who was Vitthal for them? Vitthal was the iconic incarnation of Lord Krishna himself. So Krishna and Vitthal were identical. So naturally it comes to that. See, the text, okay, of Krishna naturally becomes the text of Vitthal. The only difference is that the text of Krishna is in Sanskrit, was in Sanskrit. Vitthal definitely is a kind of Marathi devata. And therefore, Jnaneshwar rendering the Gita in Marathi in the form of Jnaneshwari, I mean, it was almost identical for these people with Gita. And therefore, they accepted Jnaneshwari as their religious text. Because, I mean, the Gita was in Sanskrit, and this, I mean, the folk, the people, all people were not, I mean, masses were not in a position to understand Sanskrit language. So this is how Jnaneshwar, I mean, laid the foundation. Okay. Now the point is that Jnaneshwar had accomplished half of the task. Why? Why? For the simple reason that there were two texts of Krishna, Gita and Bhagavad. Now Jnaneshwar wrote a commentary on Gita, but what about the Bhagavad? After a couple of centuries, Eknath came forward and he interpreted Bhagavad, Ekadashi Skanda of Bhagavad, which contains, as I told you, the dialogue between Uddhav and Krishna. And therefore, this commentary, Ekadashi Skanda commentary on Bhagavad, it was again accepted by the Warkaris, and therefore we have Gita, the Warkaris have Gita as well as Bhagavad. That is to say, Jnaneshwari as well as the text in Marathi by Sant Eknath. So this Bhagavad Dharma had its own, Bhagavad Dharma of Maharashtra had its own Pramana Vyavastha, Gita and Bhagavad. Okay. Now, the point is, see, this is like an interesting thing. The place of Gita and Bhagavad. And accordingly, the nature of Bhagavad Dharma in Maharashtra. What was the place? Really speaking, Krishna, who was responsible for these two, belong to the ancient Vedic tradition, which had already, I mean, the very name Vedic means those people who accept Vedas as their Praman. So there was already one Vyavastha there as Praman Vyavastha for Vedic Dharma, including, I mean, Krishna, of course, including Krishna. Now, what is then the relation between these early Vedic tradition, and the Varkari tradition? Did they accept the Veda Pramanya? Or they rejected that and replaced it by the Gita and the Bhagavad? Was it a kind of rebel against the Vedic tradition? No. It was the continuation. It was not the you can say revolution, but really speaking, it was the evolution of the Vedic tradition, and therefore it was the most perfect. I mean, in Bhagavad Puran, there itself you get this kind of shlok, Agama Nigamo, and so on, so forth. So it is a kind of evolution of Vedic text, Vedic Dharma. It is the most perfect expression of Vedic Dharma. And naturally, in the course of evolution, you see, what is revolution? Revolution is rejection of the whole tradition. Okay, by replacing it with something else. Whereas evolution means giving up, abandoning those elements which are not necessary, which do not work perhaps now, and only replacing them by new elements. So in this sense, Bhagavad Dharma was a kind of evolution of the Vedic Dharma. So they are not against the Veda Pramanya. They had accepted Vedas. But they would say that whatever Vedas had to say is said by Lord Krishna in Gita and Bhagavad. Not only that, where the Vedas fall short, the Lord has already fulfilled it. So as it were, Jesus seeing that I have come to fulfill and not to destroy. So the New Testament is not a rejection of Old Testament. It is not entirely replacement of Old Testament, but rather it is a kind of complement, supplement to the Old Testament. I mean, of course, the Judaism, those people would not accept this. This is a different thing. Similarly, one can say, and in fact, Prarthana Samajis, really speaking, had this kind of thing in their mind. See, they didn't reject Vedas. They had Upanishads. They rejected only the ritualistic part of the Vedas. The written Upanishads. I mean, I am talking about Prarthana Samaj. I am talking about Brahmo Samaj. Raja Ram Mohan Rai, yes, he wrote the commentary on the Upanishads. So let me put it in this way, that they accept Vedas with reserving the right to interpret the Vedas. Now, sometimes you will find that they say something which goes against what was said in the Vedas. But well, they said that we have interpreted it in that way, not rejected. And again, let me say that if you press them, they would say that we will not say that Vedas are so to say meaningless, or we don't be. The point is that since the saints have sufficiently explained the things, Vedas now become unnecessary. So this is the thing. So it's not a rejection. It's not a kind of revolution. It was an evolution which retains the tradition and reforms the tradition and goes further. So that is exactly the place of Bhagavad Dharma. Now you may say that you may observe that even although Lokmanya Tilak tried to distinguish between but he accepts so many things from this Bhagavad Dharma of Maharashtra, that is to Warkari Sampradaya. And let me point out to you that the number of quotations Tilak has in Gita Rasya. So far as Marathi is concerned, Tukaram, quotations from Tukaram exceed any other author in Marathi. So he was aware of that thing, definitely. Although Baird criticized him severely, and I can definitely say that when Tilak was very much aware of those things. So Lokmanya Tilak, again, I mean, the tradition of Tilak. Let me go a step further. I had just mentioned the name of Dr. Chanda Pendse. Chanda Pendse. Okay. Now, Chanda Pendse wrote a series of texts on Bhagavad Dharma, in which, see, he won't accept Tilak's contention that the saints, including Dhaneshwar, who wrote, of course, on Bhagavad Gita, they were proponent of nivritti or sannyas type of thing. No, this is not so. He would say that these saints were as much pravritti margi as those people, I mean those scholars like Tilak. Okay, and therefore he extended the scope of Bhagavad Dharma. He said that, well, Bhagavad Dharma was in existence even before Bhagavad Gita. So he would write Vedatil Bhagavad Dharma, Vedic Bhagavad Dharma. And then he will definitely go by the line of the deities, pointing out that, well, Vishnu, how Vishnu is connected with the Surya. This is how he would go. But Bhagavad Dharma is very much there in the Vedas. Okay. Bhagavad Gita, there is no doubt, of course. Then coming to Maharashtra, he would say that Dhaneshwar, Namdev, Eknath, Bhagavatottam Eknath, he would describe him, Tukaram, and then he would incorporate even Ramdas in that tradition. Now, if these people, these scholars of Maharashtra, these saints of Maharashtra, taken together, he would call, I mean, he would not hesitate to call it as Bhagavad Dharma, Maharashtra Dharma. And therefore, the duality, dichotomy between Bhagavad Dharma and Maharashtra Dharma of the Warkari saints and of Ramdas respectively is rejected by Chanda Pendse, as it was rejected, of course, by Ranade and, of course, Rajaram Shastri Bhagavat, although Rajwade stick to that. So this is how the general maxim of the discourse of Bhagavad Dharma in Maharashtra, which is tantamount to Warkari Sampradaya or Sampradaya of the saints. I think I have explained sufficiently which I wanted to explain to you. And with this, and of course with thanks to Pune International, I take your leave as the lecturer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for wonderful exposition. And I think relatively less known aspects of the way in which Bhagavad Dharma.
Sir, you please sound. I am not
Yeah,
listening to you.
I'm not on mute.
We can hear you, Professor Apte. We can hear you. We can hear you, sir.
So thank you, sir, Professor More. I think there are a number of details which your exposition covered, which probably are not noticed, are not so familiar, are not so known popularly. And you have brought out very interesting features of the way in which people tried to define over a long tradition of nearly, I must say, 800 years. I don't know whether are there any questions?
No, sir, there are no questions. I would request you to have a discussion with Professor More.
So it was wonderful listening to you. And I would say that this is a very thought-provoking kind of approach to way in which Bhagavad Dharma needs to be understood. And you have given a very vast canvas and very important personalities who really shaped and contributed the understanding of Bhagavad Dharma. So I very sincerely thank you for such a nice and very compact presentation on Bhagavad Dharma.
Thanks a lot, Pradeep.
Professor Apte, if you could put some questions to Professor More and take this discussion forward, because we don't have any questions in the question box.
Okay. One general question which is often raised is, what is the present state of Bhagavad Dharma? That means in terms of the way people understand and the way people follow this as living tradition, how would you characterize it today?
Yeah. See, the present situation of Bhagavad Dharma, that is to say, Warkari cult in Maharashtra. Of course, most of the people are not aware of these intricacies. I mean, they just simply follow what has been said by the saints. They definitely perform, the rites and etc. They regularly go to Pandharpur. They deliver and listen to kirtanas. They perform bhajan, etc. But so far as these philosophical implications are concerned, they are not that much acquainted with that. Not only that, even their preceptors, whosoever they are, they are not also acquainted with some such discussions which went on with Tirak, Rajwade, Ranade, and so on and so forth. There were, of course, exceptions like Dr. Bairat, but they were few. Otherwise, although this is the cult of masses, the masses are not that much aware of these things, and the so-called leaders of the cult also are not aware of that, nor are they interested in this. I am sorry to say this state of affairs.
Yeah, thanks.
We have one question by Mr. Nandu Kulkarni.
Yeah.
For Professor More, could you please talk about the essence of Bhagavad Dharma? What would you say is the essence of Bhagavad?
Sir, please pardon. I don't.
So the question is, what is the essence of Bhagavad Dharma?
Oh, see, if you ask me, I would say that this is definitely the religion which is anti-discrimination, first of all. Then it insists on simplicity. It insists on the direct relationship between the God and his devotees. And this was very well, explained by Ranade or Bhandarkar like that. So these things can be said to be essence of Bhagavad Dharma.
Very well put, very well put. Sir, there's one more question. I think you are having some audio problem at your end, which is
but I can hear.
You can, yeah. Sir, Mr. Jayesh Shinde has a question for a young viewer. How would you explain the atomic unit, most fundamental part of Bhagavad Dharma?
Which unit?
Atomic unit, the most fundamental part of Bhagavad Dharma.
So the atomic unit happens to be the most fundamental part of Bhagavad Dharma. Yeah. Oh my God. In a sense, see, this is in a way, this is a very interesting question. One can say that, well, the individual himself is the unit. Okay, because ultimately the individual who happens to say worship and perform some rites and so on and so forth. So this is so regarding any religion. Ultimately, it is the individual. But really speaking, so far as this cult is concerned, it is a kind of collectivist worship. So the people come together and they collectively do whatever they do. And therefore, in that sense, the unit, which I would call atomic, but the unit, the smallest unit of this cult is called Dindi. So Dindi is a group of persons, okay, performing devotion, etc., collectively, and this Dindi requires at least 2 or 3 persons. See, one who leads the Dindi, okay, organizes, has the instrument Veena, okay, with him, and he organizes and he directs the others, and the others could be from 1 to thousands, no problem. And these people with Dindi, they proceed to Pandharpur from their respective places every year, and that is called Wari. So Wari is the Upasana Paddhati, unique Upasana Paddhati of Warkari cult with Dindi as its smallest unit. I would call it atomic. Okay.
Right. Professor Apte, would you have any comments, observations to make? We are
No,
close to
not
the
really.
end of the
In
session.
fact, if there are any questions left, I would prefer that.
Yeah, there are no more questions, sir.
Okay.
So Professor More, we are nearing the end of our session, and we wish to really thank you for your excellent exposition on Warkari Sampradaya, on Bhagavad Dharma. You started with the interpretations of various scholars such as Dr. Bhandarkar, Rajwade, and Vitthal Ramji Shinde, and Dr. Bahirat. And then you explained how Bhagavad Dharma laid the foundation of Swaraj, of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. And you spoke of the evolution of Bhagavad Dharma, and you explained very beautifully that how this is a religion of anti-discrimination, simplicity, and the relationship between God and devotee, and collectivist worship, and one of the reasons why you started with the point as to can this be called a world religion, and in fact the idea of having this lecture was to take a look at the Bhakti movement, and as a part of that we were very happy to have you speak on this subject. I may mention to you, I'll in fact send you an email that there has been a request from a gentleman in United States asking you to speak to the Marathi audience there in Marathi. I will send that email to you.
Thanks a lot.
So with this, we would like to thank our audience for their questions and their participation. And I wish to thank Professor Apte and Dr. Latika Padnavkar for curating this session. Before closing, I would like to mention that our next event is on 23rd December at 11 a.m. on the book My Life's Blessings by Mr. Arun Firodia. Mr. Ravi Pandit, Chairman and Co-founder KPIT Technologies and Trustee PIC, will be discussing this book with Mr. Firodia, and Pune International Center's President Dr. Mashelkar will preside over this event. You are welcome to join this event. The link will be available on our website. And with this, I would like to declare this session as closed. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all.